Hey, Bass and Bob and Boatwrx followers. We're here for our countdown to the Big Bass Bash Roundtable. This is our fourth one, so if you haven't seen the previous ones, we've got Boatwrx Pro staff here, and we talked everything about the Big Bass Bash. We talked about the Big Bass Bash in the very first one 5 weeks ago, just about how to prepare for the Big Bass Bash, like, preparation type stuff, because we just weren't really close enough really yet to know conditions and that type of thing. So we're getting a little closer. I think the water levels are not the water's coming up, but it's not fluctuating greatly like we had 5 days ago, or I'm sorry, 4 weeks ago. So we're getting a little bit closer to what these water conditions might be for the Big Bass Bash. We're 0 minus, I think, 10 days, and so we'll have one more of these roundtables again next week. We're very gracious for the Boatwrx Pro staff, including Joe McBride, who, he's the general manager here at Boatwrx, but he's also a very successful tournament fisherman, and so we really enjoy his input. We have a new guest to the pro staff, so welcome to the Boatwrx Pro staff, our good buddy Jack Uxa. Jack's like, I guess I better get into Boatwrx over there so I can get on these roundtables, sell some guide trips.
I will say one thing, man. I've been coming in here quite a bit over the last year, and buying this and that, or having these guys save my butt time and time again. And they're like, "Hey, this is a good boat you got, but it's time for you to get a new boat. It's time for you to get a new boat." Well, I finally listened to them, and they were working with me and giving me and helping me. And I sold my boat last night, and this morning I came in here and bought one of the boats they had for sale here.
That's awesome.
I was on the water immediately, and I already did a guide trip.
Wow.
Thanks to Boatwrx.
That's awesome, Jack. Well,
thanks, Joe.
I think it just goes a long way to say how wonderful Boatwrx is.
Oh.
They do take good care of all of us. They take good care of all their customers. They have a really clean, excellent run operation. They have a fabulous service department. Joe and Steve, there's no twisting arms, selling boats. They're all about being very consultative, and they're just so approachable. And my gosh, they're a mile and a half from PB2 where everybody comes. So,
yeah. And they fish.
And they fish.
It makes that's the biggest difference in the world.
The service guys to the sales guy, they all sales guys. They all fish. So, yeah. So welcome to the pro staff, Jack. It's awesome. Yeah. And I think if you followed along some of our previous roundtables here that we've done the last few weeks, as I mentioned, you probably know most of these guys. I probably don't have to introduce them to you, but if I do, I'm going to anyway. So we got Dion Hibden. I think everybody knows Dion. We have Austin Culberson. He's one of those young up-and-coming guys that has been winning a lot of tournaments, being very, very successful. And he fishes individually and is very successful. And he fishes as a partner with Michael Harlan. Yeah, Michael Harlan right here next to Lawson. And they fish as a team, and they're scary. And they fish individually, and they're both scary. And then we got Lawson Hibden. I'm sure Lawson's tired of these young guys, these young whippersnappers.
He's younger than me.
All of a sudden,
1 year.
But then, what's that?
He's 1 year younger than me.
Really? No kidding? I'll be darned. Well, he's been fishing.
I just look older.
He's been fishing a lot longer, maybe.
He's a lot wiser, I promise you that.
From the great Hibden family, and of course, Lawson and Dion, all these guys, they keep up with each other. They're always cashing checks. All of us stumble also, and I think that's important to understand when you're fishing the Big Bass Bash. You're just not going to always catch them, and you should never feel bad about that. I know when I first started fishing tournaments and I didn't do very well, I thought I just don't have it. And then I'll go out there and catch a 6-pounder or 7-pounder, learn from guys like these guys, Wayne, and you just go out there and you go fishing and you catch some big ones. And so but don't ever feel bad if for some reason you're not catching them, and don't scratch your head and don't go running all over the lake. We'll talk about some of that though. And of course, we have Joe McBride here, the general manager of Boatwrx, and my good buddy Jack Uxa. So let's start off with this. I kind of like to always start with current conditions. So here we are about 10 days away from the Big Bass Bash. I think today is like April the 12th. So it's right around the corner here. 23rd is when we start. I need to make one mention, however. If you watched Randy Terrell, so we interviewed Randy Terrell, the founder of Big Bass Bash, here yesterday. If not, you can go out on bassandbob.com and take a look at it. He gave all the details about the Big Bass Bash, all the payouts, registration information, rules. One thing that he mentioned, he mentioned that first lines in the water are at 7 a.m. and first lines in the water are actually at 6:30 a.m. So anglers, just keep that in mind. You can erase that off the video, but there's some really good information that Randy talks about in terms of the event and the format. So who's on the water today?
Not you.
Me and Jack.
You guys are on water every day. I don't see those changes.
Thunderstorms tomorrow. and some
He'll
good,
still go.
and some good soccer games.
Tornado, Jack. Still be
Yeah, tornadoes tomorrow. So Jack, how was it? What's going on? What's going on with
it
the
was
fish?
a crappie trip,
Oh, okay.
so it wasn't very helpful. But you know what? I was still monitoring the water level, the water clarity, the temperature, all those kind of things that affect us bass fishermen. You know, water temperature's on the rise. You know, I tell you what, March and early April was kind of like, it would rise, but then it would stabilize and maybe even go down a little bit, and then it would jump up.
Yeah.
And now we're starting to see a little bit more, I hope, you know, it's going to be a little bit more steady now. You know, we're getting into more of mid-April. Yesterday was cold, but today was hot.
Yeah.
I mean, I was overdressed today. And
It was hot with about 40-mile-per-hour wind gust.
Yeah, with the wind, it was still hot. And
But
so
the
that's
wind-
really good.
wind
Because
was
you
brutal.
know, what happens is that surface water temperature will warm up. You know, that first 10 inches or 12 inches or something. You know, and that's why you see these jumps in water temperature, and you get all excited. You say, hey, it's 56 degrees.
Right.
Spawn's going to be right around the corner, and then the next cold front comes in at
49.
He drops back down to 48, 49 degrees.
Yeah.
And so we're getting away from that, I think. You know, now I'm starting to see more mid-50s. And if you want to go up to one of the river sections, you're going to see upper 50s.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be a little bit more stable as far as that's concerned. Same thing was as we get to mid-April, you know, Ameren UE, they have that guide curve, you know, and that's something they get really worked up about. If it gets too high, then they bring it down. And, you know, as we get to mid-April, they're going to be a little bit more relaxed and let the water rise up a little bit more, which is obviously going to help a lot of your fish go shallow. You know, this is the time of year I do a fair amount of bank beating, you know, casting at the bank and, you know, working your baits out from there, you know, crankbaits or whatever it is, jig. You know, jig bites just going to be around the corner. Of course, you guys.
How come you point to the head then? I've seen that.
Truly doesn't ever stop.
I've seen that guy before throw a frickin' swim bait this frickin' big and win a tournament.
They
Do
used
what
to
you
be,
gotta do.
you guys used to be known for finesse stuff and spinning rods.
They
That's gone out the window a long time ago, hasn't it?
I just throw them on a bait caster now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do a lot. I mean, you know, it's,
Equipment's got a lot.
yeah, equipment's got a whole lot better in the last 10, 15 years. But yeah, my favorite jig's still about a 1/4 ounce.
Wow.
I mean, you know, little brown jig about that long.
Wow.
I mean, and that'll catch as big a bass that swims in this pond. You know, that's just because there's so many more of those crawdads that size. You know, think about being a crawdad and living in Lake the Ozarks. He got a real good chance once he gets out on top.
That's a scary place.
Yeah, he's walking around Jurassic Park every minute of his life.
Yeah.
But, you know, and that's nothing more than anything we've done forever. You know, my dad, you know, when he won the first BASS that they ever held on Lake the Ozarks, he won it on a 1/4 ounce jig, you know. And it's just, that's something they won't turn down. You know, it's what he's used to seeing. You know, yeah, you can catch them on bigger baits and bigger jigs, you know, bigger offerings, but you need a little bit of stained water to do that, you know.
What size skirts? I mean, on a 1/4 ounce, it can't.
Oh, it's real thin.
It's real thin.
Very thin, you know.
Yeah.
And I like to use the living rubber stuff.
Yeah.
Too, you know. I use a lot of the silicone and the crystal clear water, but I still, you know, catch a lot of fish on brown, you know.
Yeah.
Are you going up in weight whenever it's this windy?
Oh, well, you either got to go up and wait or you got to move around.
Hide from
That's
it.
the nice thing about Lake of the Ozarks. Anywhere you stop, you can catch one.
Right.
Yeah, there's there's certain little rocky banks that you want to be on that you might not be on that day. Well, it just, for the days out, it ends up showing you, okay, they are everywhere, because, you go fish shallow right now, I really don't care where you go. I mean, at all, and you can catch them right now,
Right.
I fished the I fished the jerkbait tournament on Friday. Shoot, it was the same way as today. I mean, just super windy, and and I went down the lake, towards the gravel woods and towards the dam, and I didn't stop anywhere I didn't catch one, and that's in the big wind. I caught them on a Rapala that's that long, and I also caught them on a mega bass, but-
Main lake or back to creeks or side pockets and coves?
Well, some of it you had to get off the main lake just because it was
Too windy.
blowing so hard.
Yeah.
But that's where I throw that bigger jerkbait. I
Right.
throw it in the big wind. If you can barely stand on the front of the boat, then a big Rapala is your friend.
Right.
You can catch a big bass on it, but it catches keepers too.
Yeah.
But like I say, I don't think you can go anywhere right now and not catch them
Yeah.
fishing shallow.
Yeah.
I don't think I caught a fish that day that was over knee deep, not ever.
Yeah.
On the main lake, back in the creeks. I mean, it just seemed like, and that does, Lawson hit on that the other night. The 25-pound stringers have backed off. The fish aren't backed off. There's just more fish up there now, and those big ones aren't getting to your bait. The thing about a big bass, he's almost always one of the first ones to move. Okay, he knows when it's time to be shallow. He knows when it's time to think about spawning better than the 2 and 3 pounders. They're a professional. They've been doing it a long time. And so almost always they're the first to move, to make that transition to the bank or something like that.
And when you
3 weeks ago, when these guys were catching 25 pounds a tournament,
Right.
that's when the first big batch of them biggins that started moving up.
Yeah.
Okay? Now,
And when you say moving up, Dion, I know we've hit on this before. Robbie and Ben caught 2 25-pound bags back to back 2 weeks ago. And yes, they moved up, but it was moving up from main lake to kind of main lake points and just inside of main lake points. So I always like to clarify, when you say move up,
they just get closer to the
they
bank.
just get closer to the bank.
They just
It's
move-
not necessarily in the very back of a creek or
No,
something like that.
No, not at all. They just get closer to the bank.
Got it.
And once they move closer to the bank, as soon as they get up there where they can get around some of those little flat rock banks and stuff, then crawdads come into their food source too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think in the Solo Pro on
Yeah.
the Solo Pro on Saturday or Sunday or
Yeah,
whenever
Sunday.
it was,
I think it was Sunday.
I
Yeah.
think that big fish was still caught on a A-rig.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they're throwing it up shallow now.
Right.
They're slinging it right up there at the bank and catching them within 4 or 5 cranks of the bank. So they're still throwing that type of baits on those right kind of days, and
Right.
and that was a windy day
Yeah.
that day.
Right.
But they've made their move to the shoreline, and when I say that, now all the 2-pounders and 3-pounders
They're up there
they're
too.
up there too. So the odds of you getting your bait in front of those big ones,
Yeah.
now you got plenty of fish up there biting that it's the big stringers are just going to back off. It's not that they're backing off. There's just more competition up there for food.
Right.
And so, and that's why I go to a jig
Guys,
a lot of times.
is there anything to be said for, I'll just throw this out to the table, kind of like Jack said, that the water's maybe starting to stabilize in terms of depth right now, and it's actually been rising just a little bit. Now, tomorrow we're supposed to have some big rains, and I think we have to keep an eye on big rains between now and the Big Bass Bash, which could change up water clarity, could change some things up.
I think that'll do nothing but help.
If the water comes up, will the fish that are sitting out there in their kind of comfortable zone right now, will they move up with the rising water, or they're going to wait to make sure that water up there is stable?
You gotta watch that old bank line for sure
Yeah.
when the lake starts coming up. But as it comes up, they're gonna follow it.
Yeah.
They want to be shallow.
Yeah.
It's April.
And, we've talked about this before. It's really hard. It's going to take a 7-pounder. It has the last several years this time of year. 2 7-pounders last year on the second day, by the way. 669 or something was leading after the first day. That was caught on a crankbait, and then spinnerbait. Forget what the other bait was. Oh, and a brush hog. And where's I going with that?
Just what
kind of- go ahead.
recent winners have caught them on
Yeah, and
variety.
yeah, and in a variety of areas of the lake. Where I was going with it is that if I was able to fish it, and the only reason they don't let me fish it is because I'm Bass and Bob, I qualify. I'm not a guide, and I'm definitely not a pro. I represent the average fisherman, I always say, because I am the average fisherman. But anyway, there's 380 places being paid out. There's $325,000 plus exact weight t-shirt or exact weight stuff, and 45 places every 2-hour period plus a t-shirt deal. 1,500, I believe, is what it is if you finish first, in a period, and kind of goes down from there. But if I'm fishing it, I think I just kind of came into this mentality. Is there's 8 payout spots over 2 days. So I'm really wanting to catch 8 keepers over 2 days, because you can only weigh in 1 per period. And hopefully catch, some quality fish and cash some checks, and hope to run into a big fish. Or do you guys have any other thoughts about that as to how do you target a big fish? How do you target knowing it's going to probably take 7 pounds to catch $100,000?
Donnie Snellen makes a living out of this tournament every year.
Yeah.
I mean, he makes 5 or 6 checks every
Right.
year. And basically, and I've talked to him about it, just because I'm intrigued, does he fish different, and that's from a couple of guys who've been fishing 35, 40 years on this lake,
Yeah.
and it's always cool to watch how he always gets 5, 6 checks throughout the weekend. And really, everything he said, oh, I just fish the same way I always do.
Yeah.
I just, if a big one happens, it happens, But some of those days when he does catch, 2 or 3 in the same day, that's going to be a 20-pound day for
Right.
him
Yeah.
if he was weighing in 5,
Right.
and I'm not going to say that Donnie doesn't do that, but really he doesn't have that many giant stringers,
Right.
any more than anybody else.
Right,
Let's
yeah,
put it this way.
yeah.
But when it comes to that bash, he ends up
Yeah,
catching them,
yeah.
and but he will always tell you, he said, I just catch whatever they're biting,
Yeah.
whatever I feel like I can catch the most fish on, that's what he's fishing,
Well,
and they just happen along
yeah,
the way. so.
absolutely.
And I've always thought that's the way you have to do.
Yeah, if you're going to go into this with the mindset of I want to cash 8 checks,
Right.
you're talking about 4 big ones a day,
Right.
or 4 decent fish.
And that's
a day.
not easy. That's not easy for
It's
any
not
of
easy,
us.
But the only way to do that is to fish it like a tournament. You're not going to go out. And
Exactly.
you're not going to go throw a big glide bait
Right.
for 4 checks a day. There's
Right.
no way you get that many bites.
Yeah,
Right.
fish your strengths.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you need to go out and fish the way you're confident in and the way you think a normal 5 bass limit tournament
Yeah.
would get won.
Yeah.
Because that's what's going to cash a check. It might not win, but that'll
Right.
cash a check in every single hour, or pay.
And we've all run into 7-pounders just
Yeah.
doing that.
Absolutely. I mean,
You know,
that's how we do it all
and
the
that
time.
kind of goes back to I don't think that it's a very good idea to necessarily practice for the big bass back.
How do you practice to catch a 7-pounder?
Well,
You
guys
go
know the
out
lake,
and you
though.
fish the conditions.
Yeah.
That's what you do.
Right.
A lot of these people don't know the lake.
Right.
A lot of these
and there's-
people are only going to be here maybe the first or
Yeah.
second time coming
Right,
to the lake.
Yeah, and that's fair.
So you got to know at least where the weighing locations are. And
Go get your bearings, but don't focus so much on catching fish.
And let
At
me
least figure out how to get a bite, though. I would say, like, I want to go out there and know at least a way or two. I can get a
That's
bite,
fair.
feel confident going out, and then not fish all the stuff I like the most. Maybe just go out, figure out a way to get a bite, and go from there.
I was going to ask. I was going to ask the table. I was going to ask the table this. When I was out on the lake fishing today, I was thinking about exactly this. Round table and some. some things about how we can really, best help 3,000 people that will be watching this video that are hoping, to cast jacks or win the big one. Is, yes, we all know sometimes we don't like to fish the day before a tournament because we don't want to, go beat up on all of our fish, whatever. Day before the Big Bass Bash, it's like, man, do I really want to do this? Because if I catch a 6 or 7 pounder today, I'm going to kick myself in the butt tomorrow. But they're going to go anyway because it's a buddy weekend. It's a lot of fun. They want to be out on the water. It's springtime.
Yeah, weather's getting right.
Weather's getting right. And I think Austin just hit on this, is what are the things that you would do? Would you concentrate on learning some little areas of the lake to see where you can get some bites? Would you play around with some different baits just to see if there's, something that maybe they're hitting or biting, a little bit better, and maybe go try and replicate that in another cove 3 miles away, or kind of just what would your mindset be? Because there's going to be guys going out there and checking out the lake anyway. What do you recommend for the Thursday and Friday before the tournament?
Depends on who you are. I mean, if I live in Osage Beach, but if I was going to be a lot of fish's tournament, I'd gas it up and go up to the 75-mile marker or somewhere. So it just depends on who you are. If you've never been to the 75-mile marker at all, and you live at the 2 and you don't ever go to the 8, that probably wouldn't be a good idea.
Yeah.
Because it's just too far out of your norm. But for me, I'd go for the river.
Yeah. And so the guys that live up the river, they probably know it. And shoot, Jack, I mean, we caught some pretty quality fish a couple weeks ago up the river, and we were just running one pattern. We were fishing around wood with a spinnerbait, and the reality is neither of us had really been committed to the spinnerbait much before that. We got on a pattern like that, and we put the spinnerbait down the rest of the day, and we ended up with 25 pounds, but we ended up with 17 pounds. Probably had a few bass that would have cashed some checks. So sometimes you just got to play around with it, I guess.
I think that in this tournament, especially, I mean, being the way it is, you're looking for one big one. You just got to keep a very open mind
Right.
when you go out there. These guys have all hit on it that you got to fish the conditions. If you get a big windy, cloudy day, I mean, yeah, you probably better off throwing something moving or something you can feel.
Right.
Where if it breaks off dead slick calm, me personally,
Be
I'm
on
gonna
the
have
bottom.
a little jig in my hand a lot,
Yeah.
just because I know what will bite it. Along with catching those 2 and 3 pounders. Oh, there's a 7.
Yeah.
And that just happens. Right? You can't target that fish. Very few days out of a calendar year can you go out there and target a 7-pounder.
Right.
I mean, it just does not happen.
Yeah.
Especially the closer you get to the spawn, because there's just a ton of fish on the bank.
Yeah.
Right now, there's a ton of them up there. I mean, I didn't have a very good day Sunday. Didn't have a very good stringer at all. Got a ton of bites on a jig.
Yeah.
And I didn't throw a jig enough because I wanted to force feed a big bag,
Yeah.
something else.
Yeah.
It just wasn't happening. If I would have kept a little jig in my hand all day, I would have caught a lot nicer stringer than what I did, because I only picked it up for a couple hours and caught 14 pounds. It's just being hard-headed. Where, if I would have kept a more open mind that day, I would have done a lot better.
Yeah.
And I think that's just what you got to do. A guy that likes to throw a Carolina rig, that'll catch a giant.
That's how I caught them today. I had to go hide from the wind because
Yeah.
I tried to throw those big bass baits for 2 hours in
Didn't
that
work.
big wind, and it didn't work. I got in the backs of creeks and threw the Carolina rig and caught them
Yep.
with a little bitty Z-crawl.
You can catch one doing anything. That's the nice thing about this tournament, when they have them, in the
Yeah.
spring and the fall. It's not like if they would have had it a month ago. Then you're pretty limited on what you're going to catch him on.
Right.
But now, you can open your tackle box and he can bite any one of them.
And let me ask you, in fishing the Big Bass Bash, I hear what you guys are saying, have an open mind, have an open tackle box. But is there also something to be said for keep this rod in your hand and fish this pattern all day long?
Oh, definitely, if you get the right conditions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, based
it
on,
But you have to be doing the
based,
right thing.
based on conditions, yes.
It takes the right conditions to lock one thing in your hand to do it.
And that's kind of where I was going with not practicing so
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
Is that don't go out and get a bite on a big spinnerbait because, you know, it's blowing 20 miles an hour and they're up there real shallow ready to bite or something. That's kind of where I was going with don't get so hooked on what you find the day before.
Right.
And more fish what's happening that day. Because this time of year, it is just so crazy. Polar opposites between, you know, day in and day out is just changing so much. If you get hooked on something that you want to catch them on this, and it doesn't pan out for that pattern,
Yeah.
you're in trouble.
Yeah.
You know, and you have to be able to, you know, throw that out and, you know, say they should be biting this. You know,
Right.
they should be doing this. And that's whenever you're going to do better, is when you're predicting a bite because of the conditions you were dealt that day or that hour, you know,
Yeah.
or the creek that you just happened to pull in.
Right.
You know, it may be blowing 20 miles an hour, you know, out of the south into those north creeks, and you may be catching them, but you're catching them on something specific and you turn in and there's no wind. You may have to throw that little jig up there because that's still the same kind of spot and they're still up there,
Yeah.
but it's not the exact right conditions for them to bite that. So really just, you know, fishing what's in front of you the way that you think they should be biting is going to lead you to a lot more bites than sitting at home trying to predict how you're going to catch them.
Right, good stuff. And, you know, what are your guys' thoughts about, you know, if I was able to fish this, you know, I'd probably like to fish it by myself because I'm selfish. Because in reality, most guys, however, are fishing with a buddy in their boat, and if the buddy catches the fish, they're competing against each other for the checks. Obviously, there's also, you know, a lot of guys will split the money and all that kind of stuff. And if you're in that kind of scenario, and you got a couple guys in the boat, would you want to be throwing the same bait or having somebody else throw a different bait?
Yeah, unless you were really, really dialed in on something,
Yeah.
I would absolutely not throw the same bait.
Yeah, I would be working as a team. I mean, if Mike and I were able to fish it, if he was running the boat and I was in the back or vice versa, maybe the guy up front, depending on the conditions,
Right.
one might be rolling a spinnerbait or a crankbait, the other might be flipping.
Right.
Until we figure out what it is that they're exactly doing, then we might both be doing whatever the big fish are biting.
However, you may want to get that worked out before you get to the lake, because if you're not splitting checks and your partner is just cracking them, then maybe that's a little different. You want to get in on that action.
Right. Yeah.
But it just depends on how you're doing it. If you're splitting checks even or whatever, and then you're going to team up and work together. That's how I've always fished the bash. I think that's probably the best way to do it.
Yeah.
I think you definitely want to be nice to that net man back there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Good point.
You might think you're a little bit selfish, but there's nobody sitting up here. If I didn't work with my partner, I would fish by myself.
Right.
Completely, because that's a waste of time.
Right.
Because then you're working against him.
Right.
That just adds a whole new degree of difficulty to it.
And do
I
we,
agree.
do we,
You know,
do we
and-
go burn 20 minutes and go weigh your fish in?
That's right.
And take-
And,
Yeah, you're screwed,
You
buddy.
either got to talk it over and work it out with your partner, and
Yep.
you know, you're better off to split if you're fishing with somebody. You
Mm-hmm.
know, because that way you're working together and you figure them out. Two heads are better than one.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, you're not trying to cast over each other.
But would I want to go spend all day long with him? Nope, not at all.
Yeah, yeah.
For one reason, he's got his plan and I got my plan.
Right, yeah.
And so at some point in time, we're going to have to split her up a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm going to have to go do what I feel like's right. You
Yeah.
know, a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, you know, and if neither one of them works, then you're just working against each other.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, either split checks or fish by yourself.
Yeah.
You know, one of the two. You know,
Yeah.
how much does it mean to you?
Right,
You know,
yeah.
if it means, if that $100,000 means that much to you, go chase it by yourself.
Right.
That way you don't have to think about what your partner's thinking, you know,
Right, yeah.
and you know, but like I say, if you guys team up together and can work together that way, that's the smart way to do it, you
Yeah,
know. You know, and I'm a guy that's never got to fish it. So would I want to fish by myself? Absolutely.
Right.
I don't want to fish with Lawson.
Yeah.
I don't want to fish with Payton. I don't want to fish with Connor.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want them I don't want that to ever affect my thinking process.
Yeah.
Because if there's somebody in the back of your boat and you see that one little key skip and you have to back the boat up to make it, most time you won't. You'll let the guy with you.
Yeah.
All right, I missed that one. Get one in there.
Yeah.
And you can't do that on fishing for one, because that's the one where he'll be, the
Yeah.
one where, I'm just a little bit too quick on the trolling motor.
Yeah.
And you let that one key cast get by you.
Yeah.
And if you think there's one there, there's a good chance he is, you
Yeah,
know.
right.
Instinctive fishing is the best way to fish day in, day out, if you can.
Yeah.
The crazy thing about what these guys have been doing for the last 3 weeks, Joe Schmo off the street probably would have as good a chance this weekend as they would, for one reason. They have stuff that they have to eliminate in their
Right.
mind.
Yeah.
They have to eliminate some of that stuff, like they've been catching 25-pound
Right.
stringers. And,
That was hard to do.
I caught a 7-pounder right here,
Right.
2 weeks ago. And a guy coming out and, with nothing, no,
Right.
nothing on his
Preconception.
mind. He's just going fishing. He might actually outfish these guys this
Yeah,
weekend.
we might be fishing
Chucking a
history.
spinnerbait.
Because,
Yeah.
you're going to have to do that, It's
that's-
kind of like a guy rigging his fishing tackle in the middle of the week. Sitting down, rigging up some rods. Oh yeah, I know this is what I caught them on last weekend.
Yeah.
And sitting down and tying stuff on, sitting on the bank.
Yeah.
That makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Right.
Because you might show up at the lawn trip, watercolor be different, and you got the wrong colors on. But because you tied it on and you made the effort to tie it on and lay it out on your front deck, then you have to throw it.
Right.
You will have to eliminate it after you throw it 30 minutes in your mind. Well, that ain't gonna work, And when you're cutting it off, you almost always are thinking, that ain't even the right damn color for this
Right.
here,
Now what am I gonna do?
And my dad, it didn't make any difference where we went. He would never tie on his baits sitting on the bank. He would jump in the boat that first morning tournament. He would go to some place he wanted to fish. He would pull up on the bank, get his rods out, and just by sitting, pulled up on a beach somewhere, and getting his rods out, he knew what watercolor he was going to be dealing with. In 10 minutes of sitting on the bank, you're going to see if the fish are active, because one's
Yeah.
going to come up. You're going to see one. You're going to see a shad move. You're going to see minnows swimming in the grass. You're going to see something. Mother Nature's going to give you a clue.
Yeah.
If that blue herring's walking down the beach, if you see a loon out there paddling around, there's Mother Nature's going to tell you that minute, okay, this is what I need to be doing. If they're feeding it all, you're going to see one come to the surface.
Yeah.
Because they've only got 2 places where they feed efficiently, the top and the bottom.
Yeah.
They drive it to the surface to eat it because it's easier to catch, or they drive it to the bottom. If you don't see no surface activity whatsoever, guess what? They're probably feeding down there somewhere, if they're feeding there at all.
Right. Yeah.
And you just got to use your head on stuff like that. Am I going to have my baits tied on before I go out and fish for 100 grand? Absolutely. But I knew what they were doing a day or so before.
Yeah. Well, and I
But-
think that's what we'll have a lot with the
But
big
you
bass
just
bass.
have to be able to change minute by minute.
Be versatile.
Yes, just be ready to change your lure selection, where you fish.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's not that the fish where you were catching them move, it just ain't perfect for them right there.
Right, yeah.
Okay? The opposite side of the cove may be more perfect on that given day.
Yeah.
But you have to have that open mind.
To piggyback that, I can't tell you how many times I've, maybe picked a spot on the map or gone to a spot that I had history with and pull up there, and the second you set the trolling motor down, you're going, this don't feel right. Yeah, I don't know about this. This don't feel right. And in my earlier years, I know I'm young, but when I was really just first starting to learn, I would stick it out and still fish that.
Yeah.
Or in the same thing, going down the lake, man, that looks good. That looks good like that, and then just keep going. That's stuff that I used to do all the time. And now I try, the instant I feel something, the instant something pops in my head, or I pull up to the spot, I'm like, I don't know if I'm feeling this spot, I'm pulling the trolling motor.
Yeah.
And I know that's hard to do when you're fishing a tournament with 4,000 entries, and there's people everywhere.
You got to find a piece of bank to pull up to.
But there's probably something to be learned from that, and not, I guess, again, going back to when I said not getting stuck on what you found the week before, the month before, or the day before. Don't
Right.
force it, like you said. Just, follow your gut, and go where that takes you, and that's probably going to be where you have the most success.
So many times I'm guilty of this. I know you are. I know probably everyone at this table is kind of guilty of that, especially something cool like a buzzbait bite. You know, you get on it the weekend before or the day before the tournament. You go out there and you're throwing it, and you're knowing it's not right. You know something's different. You haven't had a single bite, and sometimes you'll live and die the whole dang day trying to do something like that. I would not do that in this tournament unless you're throwing something like that big glide and you want to you want to catch one on it. That's I understand that, but if that's not what they're biting, they're not biting. You got to figure out what it is.
Joe, let's talk about those big glides real quick. You brought those to the table for a reason, and you've been sitting there all quiet, soaking up all this great information.
Jack was petting it earlier.
I'll zoom it in.
He likes the tail, so it tickles him. We've talked about it a lot the past couple of weeks, and it's played a major role in this tournament a few times. And I think this lure kind of falls into the more stick-to-itiveness pattern if you're going to fish it.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of interesting. I watched a lot of Bassmaster Live this past weekend. They were at Chickamauga, and Carl Jacobson had a monster day on a glide bait, but it was rainy, nasty, just he had one great day, and then he had a day where he did terrible, and then another good day where he had some bites on it, and then he lost a bunch of fish on it because it's hard to land the fish on it.
How come?
But it's
looks
just
like
such a
looks like it's got
That's a lot of weight to throw
looks
around.
like it's got a lot of good some big old hooks on it.
It's just so heavy.
99% of the time, they're not eating.
That hook is as big as Dion's jig.
You can guarantee one thing: 99% of the time, they're not eating that.
Yeah.
They're coming up and wallering on it, swallowing at it, but they're not actually taking it in their mouth.
I had some swipe at it
So I've got something
2
for
days
you.
ago.
All you guys have thrown a glide bait by now. How many 7-inch gizzard shad do you ever see sticking out of a bass's mouth with the head sticking out?
Never.
Never.
Zero.
Very,
No,
no,
it's always-
not one. I ain't never seen
Not one.
that. Okay.
Always the tail.
I've not caught a ton on it, but I've caught enough to know I've never caught one on it head first.
Have you ever reeled one in where that bait was in its mouth?
No.
Not me neither.
So what?
That's why it's hard to land them. I don't think they ever have.
So what you're saying is they're coming up from behind it.
Yeah.
There's something about the action of the bait that triggers the fish wanting to do something to it.
I'll tell you what, it's filthy, man.
Yeah.
I started fishing a glide bait this
Yeah.
last weekend, and just playing around with it, getting a feel for it, and it just absolutely looks filthy.
Well,
It's
the reason you don't land a lot of them on it, I think, is because they come up and they follow it. A lot of them just follow it forever. Some of them have no intentions on ever touching it.
Right.
But every now and then, one of them just swipes up there and gets something. And that's where you lose him. I mean, he just swipes up there and he gets,
He's
one
hanging
trouble
on
hook.
it like this.
Very few times will you
And this
hook
thing
him.
is so heavy. If
You're
You're
gonna
gonna
have
have
them
a
in
mouthful.
like right here
Right.
or whatever.
But is it a 7-pound bait?
Oh yeah. Now, Dion, how many times do you think that bass eat a 7-inch shad and eat it the first time, first try, straight down?
Never.
They kill it first.
They
Don't
kill it first.
Yeah. And they do
Most
the same
of-
thing with an A-rig.
They do
just
it with
swim through it.
They do it with all kinds of baits. He's got to swallow a crawdad
Right.
tail first.
Yeah.
99% of the time when you get one of them good hard bumps, you're like, oh, shot, there it is. Guess what? He had it the whole time. What you felt was him going poof, blowing it right back out.
Yep.
That bait right there, the reason you don't hook them on it is because it's a pursuit. They come up on it and they sneak up on it too, and that's why you see him poke along real slow. And it's a big enough bait that he knows, wait, I gotta just make it right. And when he makes that last little grab, he's just trying to get a hold of it.
Yeah.
Okay? How many times when you're throwing a weighted jerkbait and the bite that you get while it's sitting dead still,
Yeah.
okay? And 90% of the time, head first.
Yep.
Exactly.
He thinks it's already dead.
Yeah.
The reason you can't get that same bite on that one is because it sinks.
It's moving.
It goes to sinking. When
Yeah.
you stop it, it goes to sinking.
Doesn't sink very fast.
It doesn't sink very fast, but still.
There's something about it though that they will not eat it head first. And
Yeah.
that's why you lose.
I mean, I
I bet
had
if we had 10-pounders in this lake, they'd eat
I
it.
went down
Oh, yeah.
I went down one big long bank on Sunday, I think, with that one of those glide baits, that hyper shad, and I would count it down 5 to 7 seconds, and it would only be by then maybe a half a foot under the surface.
Yeah.
And slow roll it back. It's painful, painfully slow. I did have a couple, exactly what you guys said, and I was kind of curious because that really the first time I ever committed to it on an entire bank. And I felt a couple, something different, but nothing there.
You just said it. You committed to it for an entire bank.
Yeah,
I've committed to it for an entire day. Not one.
A week.
Or a week.
Yeah.
I've never done that. I've always got to catch one on a little jig. But
Yeah.
I've thrown it all day and not got bit.
Right.
That's
Now,
what's
I
hard.
will say something about what you just said and going down the bank
Yeah.
with that bait. That is not something that I very often do.
well, I was trying to play with it.
Right.
I
No,
was-
I get that.
And I was seeing, I went from a main leg point, and the whole bank had wind.
And once you're
From a main leg point all the way back to back pea gravel where I was turning up mud.
yeah.
Just to see.
I grew up at a little tackle store. My mom and dad owned a little tiny tackle store in Gravel Woods Mills that wasn't, it wasn't but about 3 of these tables set together. That's how big it was. And we always had a fish in a tank. We always had a fish tank. And I watched those fish eat crawdads. I watched them eat minnows. And a big old shad like that, he might swim around with that in his mouth for 30, 40 seconds till it quits wiggling. When he quits wiggling, he spits it out, positions himself to where he can swallow it head first,
I'll be darned.
and that's how it happens.
Wow.
Crawdad, same way. He jumps, grabs your jig, and he'll sit there and hold on to it. And he'll just hold on to it. Next thing you know, he boop, blows her back out, repositions himself, and sucks it down right. And it's just the way they do it.
It'd be great to have a video of that. That's
99% of the time, what a lot of people feel is it spitting up their, how many times have you had that happen on a worm, a jig,
Right.
anything? Man, he just knocked fire out of the thing, and I didn't get nothing.
Right.
That's him spitting her out.
Yeah.
He had it the whole time.
Yeah.
It's a very gentle deal, trust me.
Yeah.
It's not vicious
Yeah.
like we would always like to believe.
Right.
And like you see on the surface a lot of times, it is vicious.
Right.
But he's trying to kill it. He's
Right.
trying to get it killed, so he can then swallow it. But down in the water, it's not real vicious. It's real. He just sneaks up on stuff and grabs it, and sucks it in. A 6-pounder could suck your bait that far. And I've witnessed. I've sat there. I caught one on Lake Lanier. I caught a 6-pound spotted bass one time, and it followed my jerkbait as far as I could see it, and got from about here to your shoes. And I just let it sit. I thought, well, I'm not bringing it no closer because I don't want to spook that fish. And about 30 seconds into it, I'm sitting there watching. My bait I see the fish's gills, doop, and my bait went that far, just shoot right down his throat.
Wow.
And it's not a real vicious deal like everybody would like. Even a crawdad. Most time on a crawdad, they'll go down there and they'll actually wait till he throws them claws up a lot of times. Kind of that's the only self-defense he's got. But most of the time, before he grabs him, he'll let them claws come up in the air, and then he just picks him up,
Yeah.
and then he swims around with him. Sometimes he'll get it a second time to get it down in his mouth. That's what those rust spots are in the back of his throat. Those are
Yeah.
crushers.
Right.
And he'll get it back there, and he might tote that dang thing around. You think, well, he swallowed that one. You think that, and then first thing, no, there's this puny crawdad laying on the bottom, and that old fish is sizing it up, and he'll get around there, get to where it can go down tail first, and sucks it right back in, and because same way with that shad tail, you never see all you see is them long feelers that right off the end of his nose sticking out of his throat when he's eating crawdads.
A big crawdad put up. I watch them in the tank a lot.
Oh, they'll
It's been a lot.
fight.
They put up
They
a hell
will.
of a fight. It takes. I have seen a 4-pound bass go round and round and round and round with a crawdad this long for days
Wow.
and not be able to kill it. And then eventually you go in there and there's pinchers laying on the bottom.
Wow.
You got it. But they put up a fight, and it isn't an easy deal.
Yeah.
Not a big one.
One of the best things that I've ever seen out of that fish tank so many times, and it's what made me a jig fisherman like I am, and that is I have seen a bass have 20, 30 minnows in his mouth. And you let him get to doing it, and he's gathering them up. He's just grabbing them. You know, and there's scales coming out the back of his gills and where he's sucking in the minnows. And you take a crawdad and you slip it in the back part of the tank where he's not even facing. You just set it in the water and let it float to the bottom. And most of the time, when it hits on the bottom, that fish will just stop moving. Because he heard it. There's no doubt in his mind. He just, wait a minute, he spins around, and as he's going to eat that crawdad, minnows, he's spitting minnows out. They're coming out of his mouth, and when he gets to that crawdad in the end of that tank, he annihilates it most of the time. And it goes in his mouth, and he don't spit that one out till he's ready to swallow it.
So-
that always made me feel good about any time I'm fishing. If I really want to catch one, I'm gonna pitch a little crawdad out there where he can find it.
So,
You know, and it,
let's kind of talk about that just a little bit, Table. So, you know, in the winter time, and we're kind of in a transition time right now, it seems to me anyway, other than when I throw the dark jig, which I throw a lot, but in the winter time, and we're transitioning now, you know, most of us, and I think a lot of the tournaments have been won on more minnow type of baits, you know, a stick bait, an Alabama rig. You know, we're starting to get the spinner bait. I don't know what the hell they think a spinner bait is. I guess they think it's one of those things. But
Yeah, it
but
looks like a small ball shape.
based on what you're saying, Dion and team, are we transitioning and then thinking about the Big Bass Bash? Are we starting to transition into, don't, you know, they're going to maybe be a little bit more active, and yeah, they may chase, but is the jig bite something that's kind of really prevalent and coming on and will be in the next 10 days?
I'll tell you
I'll
something
help
that
you. I'll help
happens.
you out. Mark Tucker caught 19 pounds.
Yeah.
And
And
I'm
had
just going to
one
tell you,
that was 7.5.
and I'm going
Right.
to tell you right now, he's a bad guy about having.
He wasn't throwing an Alabama rig.
No.
He's a bad guy about having 3 or 4 poles in the boat,
Yeah.
and all of them being the same one.
Right.
I mean, it's.
I
he-
fished with him a lot.
He's the most single-minded person I've ever been around when
Yeah.
it comes to a certain time of the year, and it's time. It's going to be really. It's going to be right in the middle of it by the time Big Bass happens.
And kind of going back to a question I asked earlier, which I thought you guys answered it brilliantly. And would a jig of some sort or a bottom bait like that of some sort be something that if you were just going to commit to a bait versus an A rig or a swim bait or something like that, is that a bait that you would commit to all day
Absolutely.
and just play the wind? You
My
know?
biggest bass ever came on a jig.
I don't
What's
know
that?
that you even have to play the wind.
Yeah. Well, just to have your,
Well, if I could only have one, it would be a jig,
yeah,
and it wouldn't be a big one.
Yeah.
I mean, just- you will catch every one it comes in front of, and it gets worse the closer you get to the spawn. You'll notice you're getting your trailer bit off a lot more, and that's because they're not trying to eat
I had
it.
a lot of those today. It wasn't on a jig, it was on the Carolina rig.
Same difference.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily trying to eat it.
Right.
You know, they're more so
Just trying to
Get away
move.
from
getting it
me.
away.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of times in males. A female, you're not going to miss her very often.
Yeah.
Normally, she's going to suck that jig in. You're going to catch it. But like they were saying, you know, a lot of times, you know, bite it and spit it out. That happens a lot more right now than any other time of the year. You know, and it's frustrating. It happened to me that day 20 times on a little jig.
Yeah.
You know, and I can feel them pretty good.
Yeah.
But that just happens a lot. You know, normally what you're feeling is him spitting it back out. Well, still spitting that thing out versus a little
Right.
jig, I still feel more comfortable
Yeah.
with a little jig, you know, over something big.
To catch a 7-pounder?
Yes.
If I'm gonna concentrate on like a crawfish bite, I think I would have a couple things that I would keep in the arsenal.
Yeah.
I would obviously have a jig, and I like the idea of a smaller jig.
Yeah.
Everything's gonna bite it. A big one's not gonna look at it. and
One
not
fourth,
bite it.
1/4 is way too little for me.
Well,
I could
maybe like 3/8
I
or
could never
something like
feel
that.
it. So I'd throw a 3/8 or a 1/2 ounce
But-
dark jig.
I have come to really like moving baits.
Yeah.
More, I used to just pretty much flip. That was
Yeah.
something I love to do. But I would probably have something like a brown or a red square bill, something like that.
Right.
That way I could cover a little more water, figure out where I'm starting to get a few more bites, and
Yeah.
then I can slow down
Great
back in
idea.
those areas
Great thought.
with the jig.
Yeah.
And the other thing I might be able to do if I got around docks or at Squareville, just I can't get into places.
Right.
I might have something like a chatterbait, like a brown or a green
Right.
pumpkin chatterbait,
Right.
something like that, or a red one, just to
And when you-
mimic a jig as well.
And you know,
or a crawfish.
chatterbait's a really popular bait on the Bass Pro Tour, and I think has become a very popular. It maybe not so much at Lake of the Ozarks. I mean, I think it's catching on. I know.
It's gaining a
I know you
I'm
saw
fairly certain it won Sunday.
saw them a lot of them. What's that?
I'm fairly certain it won on
Yeah,
Sunday.
right. Yeah. How do you work that? And I know this time of year is a good year for it. When we talk about a chatterbait, number one, is there any specific watercolor you're looking for? Are you looking for wind, or does it matter? And are you throwing it out there and letting it hit the bottom and keeping it close to the bottom?
I think the reason it's so popular on tour right now is because it's probably one of the most versatile baits
Yeah.
out there.
Right.
And you can get bit on it anywhere you go in the country. You can emulate bluegill or bram sunfish type fish. You can emulate shad. You can emulate crawfish. You can fish it on the bottom. You can fish it up. You can hop it. You can kind of pull it off the bottom. You can skip it. You can fish it around grass. You can fish it around docks.
Right.
It's just the only thing it doesn't do well is wood.
Right.
That's not something that's going to come through a treetop very well.
Right.
But it's just hard to do something wrong with
Right.
with a chatterbait.
Yeah.
It's such they're not intimidated by it, I don't think. And as long as you feel that thing thumping,
Right.
you're doing fine. Now that may not be the exact way that they want it that day, and you may have to kind of switch it up a little bit. But you can't hardly do anything wrong.
Yeah.
And to kind of answer your question on, like, how do you work it?
Yeah.
It really depends on what you're trying to mimic, right? I mean, if you're trying to mimic a shad, first of all, you're going to probably throw something with white or chartreuse in it.
Right.
And you'll probably throw it around the outside of the docks or on windy points. If you're trying to mimic a bluegill, I'm going to probably focus more around backs of creeks. I'm maybe focus around docks a little more, around the floats. And if I'm trying to mimic a crawfish, I'm going to keep it near the bottom. And I can fish, well, pretty much from the front to the back of the creek, but I'm going to keep it up on the bank line and work it and probably use like a red or a brown.
Yeah.
So I think it's all depending on how you want to do that. But that is a bait I like to use this time of year.
Now,
that-
similar to the
What
wigglewort, do you consider a covering water type of bait? Or are you
What's that?
the chatterbait, or are you wanting to work it? Are you
Yeah.
covering water, or are you fishing it kind of slow?
I tend to bring that thing.
Yeah.
Do you?
I'm bringing it most of the time.
I play it like a spinner bait or a crankbait,
Yeah.
but it's just something a little different. They may not see it.
Yeah.
You can really be
It's
versatile
big.
with it.
Last year, we fished from Okeechobee all the way to the St. Lawrence River, and I weighed in fish in every single tournament on a chatterbait at some
Plays
point.
everywhere you go.
You know, just because it's like they were saying, you can't really go wrong with
Right.
it.
Yeah.
You can kind of mimic whatever's happening.
Right.
You know, if you think they're eating crawdads, I'm going to throw a green.
Right.
Something. Right. If you think you want to throw a big shad at them, put a bigger trailer on it, throw it like a spinnerbait. Or
Yeah.
something.
The
It
reason
will catch one anyway.
the reason so many guys throw it around the country too is probably 80% of the lakes that they fish have grass, and it makes a huge difference in grass.
Yeah.
Okay, because those fish don't all stand on the bottom in grass; they don't all stand on the top.
Yeah.
In that grass, and that's just an extremely good offering for the whole little depth range there, and you can vary it all in one cast. You can throw it out there, let it sink to the bottom, then take off, wind it real easy. You can speed it up, raise your rod tip up, go back down. The guys that really whack them on them are the Carolina guys, the Brian Thrifts, the new,
Or Andy Montgomery.
that new boy, Andy Montgomery.
Right.
Brian New, that's him. Reason they do it is because they work it. I
Right.
mean, there's never throwing it out there and
Just reeling it
never.
back.
It's always, they throw it out there, they let it go down close to a piece of cover, they work it up, bump it, and they let it go back. It's a lot more work
Right.
than what most people want to do with it.
Yeah.
We have a different situation here in a lot of respects is because of the floating docks.
Right.
And so our strike zone can be that close to the surface.
Right.
So that makes that another pretty good offering,
If you pay
But-
attention, it's kind of replaced a lipless crankbait. I'm not going to say
Right.
it's done away with it, but it has kind of replaced it.
Got
Well,
it.
Lake the Ozarks has never really been known for a lipless crankbait because we don't have grass.
Right.
You know, but it will catch one. It will catch a big one anywhere, but it does dominate more so on grass fisheries
Fish.
than here.
Fish go in and out of that grass, and I don't care where it's at. I don't care if it's matted grass. I don't care if it's milfoil. We used to have milfoil right here, but those bluegills stand at the edge of it a lot of times, and they go into the grass, they come back out of the grass. And a chatterbait's extremely good for that. You throw it out there, wind it up, when you feel your line, tighten it up, you're over a piece of grass. And you just pull it on into it, and then next thing, jerk on that son of a gun to clear the grass off of it. That's what a fish looks for.
Right.
He looks for that thing to go rushing out of that grass,
Yeah.
and it's a reaction bite.
Got it.
On this lake, I view it as a spinnerbait I can skip.
That's pretty cool.
That's how I
Yeah.
utilize it on this lake.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, if I'm fishing a bladed jig on Lake of the Ozarks, it's around some kind of a dock.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't sit here and even think of a time that I did not or I caught one or tried to catch one not fishing it around a dock. And it's because it's something that I can put in a hole that is this big from 30, 40 feet away.
Yeah.
And it skips. But it catches the same fish a spinnerbait would most of the time on this lake.
Yeah.
And like Dion said, a lot of the time we're keeping it up underneath those docks.
Yeah.
Where normally we're fishing a jig on the bottom. Well,
Right.
they're not always on the bottom.
Right.
A lot of times they're up under those docks, especially this time of year.
Let's talk about docks for a minute. That's a great conversation on the, talking about the jig and then talking about the chatterbait. Let's talk about boat docks as it relates to the Big Bass Bash. We have 25 or 30,000 boat docks on this lake. The heaviest concentration of boat docks are from the dam to just, Hurricane Bridge area. And then there's some other coves, but then, they get a little sparser, a little bit more main lake-ish up the river. Is this a type of cover or structure that you would focus on? And if so, would it be main lake, back, a side pocket somewhere towards the back of a cove? And if so, how would you fish them? Go ahead, Jake.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, man. I love fishing docks. I love flipping docks. It hasn't been a big deal so far this year, but I mean, that is all going to absolutely change as we move forward through
The Big Bass Bash.
last couple weeks of April here.
Yeah.
These fish are going to be actually, spawning and, right now they're still been in that preparation mode. They've still been, for the most part, moving and feeding, and, you haven't had to go slow. Well, that's going to change. When it comes to that jig bite, it's just around the corner. You can slow down, you can flip around a lot of these docks. Now, which docks, that's going to be the whole big thing. I mean, there's going to be some guys that are going to be on some steep creek channel banks and inside coves that are catching them. The main lake stuff, I probably would leave that alone for a little bit. As of right now, there's still a lot of fish on main lake points.
Are those fish kind of just moving up, or those are just ones that live there all the time?
In my opinion, they're on the move, and the water temperature has warmed up to a point where they feel like, hey, I can move. I don't have to go slow. I feel like they've got a lot of energy right now, and so they're just stopping at those points. But for some reason, they feel like, I don't think largemouth really migrate, but I think they're just on the move for whatever reason. Now that's going to switch, and the jig bite's going to get a lot better. In fact, it probably already has in the last few days, just because of the time of year. And then the dock bite is going to get a whole lot better.
Yeah.
And a lot of people I take out aren't comfortable with docks. They get a lot of snags around docks, and then docks can be a challenge. You got to be patient with docks, but you should absolutely be fishing them as we move forward and the spawn. And the other thing that's going to be forcing these fish to get to the docks is Big Bass Bash every year. Tons of fishermen, tons of boat
Pressure.
Pressure and trolling motors and all that kind of stuff. And those fish, they know where it's safe, and they go to those docks. And you got to be willing to get in there with your 20-pound test and be patient and pluck them off. There's nothing wrong with that, especially about 9 a.m., maybe 10, 11 a.m. That's when prior to that, a lot of times they're still like, hey, we're all happy.
All right.
And then all of a sudden they're like, Okay, I know what this is. I've seen this before.
It's like deer season.
It is. It's opening weekend for.
And that's something that a lot of people don't understand that well, but if you can't efficiently fish around a boat dock and you're not comfortable with it, you're better off not even trying. I'm just being honest
Yeah.
as I can.
There's some ugly dock fishermen, is what you're
well,
saying.
no, the more noise you make around the boat dock, your chances just go way down. You know, and it's not even the casting a lot of times. Normally it's more so what you're doing with your trolling motor than it is, you know, landing up on top of the dock or on a walkway or whatever.
Yeah.
But you spook him worse, you know, by slinging it up there and making a bad cast, where there are certain baits that, you know, are better if you're not comfortable with it. You can throw a weightless Cinco. Dad's hit on it a
That,
couple times.
yeah, that's,
But
I mean,
that will
yeah,
catch a giant bass this time of year just because of the presentation you can make with it. It's so quiet.
Right.
You know, because they're standing up there super shallow a lot of times, and you just slide it in there and it never hardly makes a ripple, where you're trying to sling a half-ounce jig under there and
right.
make a lot more racket with that.
And
The
so-
Senko's very non-intrusive.
Yeah.
So let me just peel the onion on that just a little bit. So, you know, I know what you guys are talking about. You're talking about, you know, getting the baits where a lot of other people can't, and where the bass are gonna, like Jack said, where they're gonna hide out, like skipping a bait underneath the cables, or casting a bait, flipping it maybe over the top of a cable, or skipping it under that first, you know, in between the first floats, you know, where you got an opening there. And yes, I definitely learned from Jack that with a spinning rod and a weightless Senko, it's pretty easy to do.
It's deadly.
And it catches big fish. You don't have to get all fancy with a jig or a beaver or tube on a Wayne's head, or what'd you call that?
Stupid too.
The stupid tube. You don't have to do all that. But let me just peel the onion. So that's an easy way to do it. We got a lot of boat docks. There's also, if it's not, just like you said, Lawson, if it's not your thing, you got two guys in a boat and you got, you know, be paying attention to each other, because usually when somebody's flipping, the other guy's kind of got nothing to do. But let's say you're just not going to mess with all that, because like you said, it can be a headache, and if you don't kind of understand what, you don't have the skill to do it because you don't fish enough or whatever. Can you still fish around boat docks and have success and catch a big one? And if so, what kind of baits, what kind of rock, just fishing alongside of docks?
That's been my opinion of boat docks the whole time, and I told you that in the very first one.
Yeah.
The boat dock's just something else they got to stand around. Okay. Do I believe that they tuck back under them? Absolutely. But by the time that tournament rolls around, are they going to be on pea gravel, or are they going to be on rock banks? And that's where you got to be fishing. You got to be fishing on the right style of bank.
Right.
Okay. Because they're the only thing that's on a bass's mind. 2 weeks ago when we did this,
Yeah.
then I would have told you something different. As of right now, spawning is on their mind. Are they doing it? No.
Right.
But they are thinking about it.
Yeah.
So they're slowly heading towards those spawning areas.
Right.
Okay? Now, my opinion of main lake fish and fish that are in creeks, all it takes is a tiny little spot for one to spawn, okay? And if that little pocket's out on a bluff, they can spawn in that
Right.
also.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't take much for a fish to be comfortable. I've always thought that the larger they get, the less they do move, okay? And so, yeah, I believe there's some fish that never swim in the mouth of a creek.
Yeah.
Don't have to. They know how to get a mouthful of food.
Yeah.
And they know that there's a flat rock, you know, just down the bank there a little bit, that they can pull into this little dip in the bank and make a bed right there. And
Yeah.
that's good enough.
Right. Good.
We fished for many, many years all over the country, chasing them on the bed and stuff like that. And the best fishermen find them where nobody else looks for them, okay? On Lake of the Ozarks, you have tons and miles and miles of good spawning shoreline, you know, pea gravel to sandy
Right.
banks and stuff. They're everywhere. That's all you have to keep in mind. What kind of bank are they on right that minute?
Right.
You know, are they on secondary points, staging up to move onto
Right.
the bed, okay? And if there's a boat dock on that secondary point, of course, he's not gonna swim 50 yards to get to another boat dock. No, he's just gonna back up under that one.
Right.
What he's hiding there around. When the fishing pressure comes, he's gonna move the closest place he can get to not get thrown at.
Yeah.
Okay? But he's still gonna be on the same mindset of heading to where we're gonna spawn.
Right.
Do I think they're gonna be spawning by that tournament? I seen one chasing a bluegill day before yesterday. Okay? And I slipped in there, bobber in hand. I was crappie fishing just so I could see it. And it was standing back up under the dock, up off the bottom. Okay? That's a miserable son of a gun to try to make bite.
Yeah.
I don't care what you're doing. If he's suspended in that much water, he's hard to make bite.
Right.
Simple as that. Until he does make the effort to get down on the bottom, he's hard to catch. Simple
Is he
as that.
spooky?
He's very spooky because he's got nothing else. He's not thinking about eating that much. He's standing there very aware of his surroundings. How many times do you see him floating after the spawn? You just see him floating in the middle of the cove. Guess what? You can't throw to that one. I mean, you have to skip it past him. If it lands in the water on an overhead cast, he just disappears and he's gone, okay? This is one of those times where fish where the fish are at, okay? You know, and a good day of practice does not hurt that. You have to go figure out what stage of the game they're in this tournament, okay? So practicing, just don't jerk.
Yeah.
Don't jerk on the day before the tournament because it's gonna piss you off. You're gonna bruise the wrong one.
Yeah.
That's just like me and that Everett Lawson's got a bad habit. After a tournament's over, you're done. And he'll go put trolling motor water, go fishing for 30 minutes. I'm like, dude, doesn't that just piss you off when you catch one? You know, and it does me, so I don't do it. When my money's up and I'm done, I put her on the trailer and I leave that pond. Okay? But
If you get bit the day before and you pull it away from them, or don't set the hook or whatever, will that fish be there the next day?
absolutely, everything he puts in his mouth hurts him.
Yeah.
Think about a bluegill. When you catch a bluegill up in the boat, it's like he turns to a porcupine right before you touch him. He's got more fins than a damn porcupine. Everywhere that I mean, and think about what a fish puts in his mouth. He swallows that thing.
Yeah.
What spooks that fish is when you go, there he is, whack,
Right.
and you jerk, and his freaking jaw pulls out, you know,
Right.
because you're using 40-pound braid, you know, and stuff like that. My dad made a living catching the same fish that he had biting at practice.
No kidding.
Okay? He also used to do, I mean, to have the patience that he had, my dad had zero patience. Okay? Everybody thought, oh, that's the most patient. And no, it's not. He had a 5-minute rule. He didn't catch one in 5 minutes, he was moving. He would go someplace else. But when he got a bite, he was the most patient individual ever. Okay? Pitch into a tree. You know, knowing he just pitched 10-pound line in the edge of that tree. He's like, oh, there's one. 90% of us jumping, whack at him. My dad would stand there and hold on to it. 99% of the time, a fish will not swallow your bait in the piece of cover you had him bite.
Really?
Okay? For one reason. There's another one standing there, odds are. That also tells you that you need to make another pitch in there when he
Right.
swims out of there.
Right.
And most of the time when he swims out of there, he's going to swim out in the open, he's going to spit that bait out, swallow it back correctly. So when you get that bite a lot of times, if you know you made a bad cast, oh, there he is. Most people can't do this. I'm just going to tell you, I still have a hard time with it. But if he swims that far, how many times have you ever had a giant bass swim back to what you hooked him out of?
Yeah.
Doesn't happen.
Uh-uh.
They get out in the open and they
Yeah.
fight and they pull,
Yeah.
but they get out in the open. You let him swim that far, I can land him on 4-pound line.
Right.
Day in, day out. It's right there when it happens that you gotta say, oh, he's in a bad spot. Let him move just a little bit and then pull into him and you got him. You
And
know?
every one of those cables is a bad spot.
Every time you pitch behind
They
a
will
cable,
break your heart.
it's a bad spot.
Yeah.
There's many, many times. There's a reason that me and Lawson coat our trolling motor up through there with a piece of foam around it. Because when I get a bite behind that cable, I don't set the hook necessarily. If I know I'm in a bad spot, I kick that trolling motor up on high and I go to it. And as I'm going to it, I'm gonna ram it. It's gonna hit hard.
Yeah.
But as I'm going to it, I'm just picking up my line and hopefully he'll swim just that little bit.
Yeah.
But when I do set the hook, I'm right over the top of it.
Right.
I can lead him away from that cable anywhere I want to go.
Yeah.
But if you pitch out there and he bites you, you set the hook and your line's this way over that cable, you ain't gonna land him.
Right.
99% of the time, you're gonna lose him.
Yeah.
That's just a
Good.
fish landing
Good.
deal, you
Good.
know. But
Good stuff.
it's hard to do. It's hard to do. And we do a lot of that because of catching crappie in the winter. There's a time in December. There's a time in the December month where at some point in time I hope they have a tournament and it lands through that time, because there's a time when they'll bite a little Kalen grub that's that long better than any bait you can throw in there, and I'm talking giant bass.
Yeah.
I mean, me and Lawson, since he's been alive, we've probably had 10 different days that our best day of the year comes on a crappie jig
Wow.
in December.
Yeah.
And it's just, they won't eat anything else.
Yeah.
But he's about that far underneath the foam, and that little tiny jig comes down through there and he'll jump and grab it. And guess what? About halftime you land him over cables, you land him over hydro hoist and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And you just gotta, you have to be the mindset that you are going to catch a big one.
Right.
Okay? You can't just think, oh, well, there's another 3-pounder, because every now and then when you set the hook, oh, hell, that was a big one.
Yeah.
And now I'm screwed.
Yeah.
You gotta be careful with that.
Yeah.
You
Gotta
know?
be ready for it.
Pitching that wood and stuff. One thing that I think would be a key, every piece of wood, you know, it happens to you every day. You're fishing along around them docks and stuff, you look down there, there's a piece of wood right there. Okay? Guess what? For the most part, everybody does the same thing. They get too close to that piece of wood and then you're screwed.
Right.
Every one of them that happens to me, that's one of the only times I reach over, I punch it on my GPS.
Right.
Okay? Give it 2 hours, come back, I can catch one out of that most of the time.
Yeah.
But if you pitch to it from here to your shoes, he's probably already spooked.
Right. Yeah.
But give him 2 hours, come back. Mark every one of those. Every place that's a likely looking spot. That's why they got an endless supply of GPS numbers.
Right.
Okay, I mean, mine looks like I can't even explain what my GPS looks like. But I mean, every one of those is a potential bass.
Yeah.
At some point in time, I could slip back in there and, okay, nobody else sees this one because it's just out deep enough, you know, and I come back to it, you know.
Yeah.
So that day of practice for me, the day before the tournament, it's going to be, see, about what stage of the game they're at. Lake of the Ozarks, I've said this a million times, it's one of the easiest lakes in the world to fish. Pull into the mouth of your favorite creek, put your trolling motor down, don't pick it up. Fish for an hour in the same direction. Go in every cove, every pocket, out, and just fish in one line for an hour. Sometime in that hour, you're gonna fish over a channel swing, you're gonna fish over bank changes, you're gonna fish by spawning areas, you're gonna fish from rock this big to sheer rock to gravel, pea gravel, sand, mud bottom. You're gonna fish over the whole deal in an hour.
Yeah.
And guess what? No place on this lake, if you do that, you're going to catch a fish in that hour.
Yeah.
Okay? Where you get the most bites, guess what? That's where you go back to the next day.
Right.
You go back to that stage of the game.
Right.
You know, where they were on pea gravel. Okay? Now the only problem with it is if you go back and it's a totally different day,
Right.
they might not be on the bottom as good.
Right.
They might be floating, you know, a little bit, and you have to change your bait selection up. But he's not going nowhere.
Yeah.
He's already there. And that's why I told you, these fish have already made their move.
Yeah.
They're up, okay? Now, are some of them still in 10 feet of water? Absolutely. But they're not going back.
Right.
So I just made it real easy for
Right.
you how to go find them. They're gonna be a 10 foot or less, and go fishing, 1 hour. If you can't fish till Saturday morning, put your trolling motor in the water, take off fishing for an hour.
Yeah.
Keep paying attention. How deep was it when I got the most bites? You know, what kind of rock was he on? What kind of bank? Because he's got one thing on his mind, the big ones,
Right.
spawning. And they're not necessarily doing it, and they might not do it till the full moon in May,
Right.
but it's still on their mind.
Yeah.
Okay, they're already up there on the bank. It's on their mind.
Let me ask a question. That's great information, to be honest. You know, I've heard you say that before in some seminars, and I can tell you that advice has helped me so much when there's been times where it's just like, I don't know what the hell these fish are doing. And I'll just get in the creek, put the trolling motor down and start fishing. And I catch some and it's like, okay, and I go to another creek, same deal.
You've got only one problem where you live. You live in the glaze, and let me tell you something, there's a lot of that crap looked all the same.
Yeah, yeah.
But when I do it in the glaze,
Well, I fish around a lot of places.
but when I do
honestly.
it in the glaze, I still make it that simple.
Yeah, oh
I
yeah.
go to a creek
Yeah.
in the glaze.
Yeah.
I don't just start down the bank
No,
because
right.
there's miles and miles of that rock
Right,
there,
yeah.
okay? But I'll go in Party Cove,
Yeah,
put the trolling motor in front of it, head to the back.
Right.
In an hour's time, you're gonna go clean to the back end of that thing,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And somewhere you're gonna figure out, okay, they're on pea gravel.
right, exactly.
So,
I was gonna ask a question, and this has to do with fishing pressure. And this is like, you know, the fish you talk about spitting the jig out. So you guys can spit this idea out all you want. But there's a lot of fishing pressure, gonna be a lot of fishing pressure. There's gonna be a lot of fishermen thinking about these fish should be spawning, so we're gonna get to the backs of some coves and stuff like that, or fishing, you know, some of the suggestions, which are great suggestions around boat docks and things like that. Some main lake maybe. There, in my opinion, there's more shoreline, well, maybe not more. There's a lot of shoreline on this lake that are bluff ledges. And they're very accessible. I mean, you got some that are just like super steep, but you got some that are just stair-stepping ledges. Very rarely do I see very many people out there fishing that. Probably for good reason. I don't know. I do. But I always check them anyway, other than when the wind's howling like it was today. What do you guys think about that being a potential for a big fish? Nobody's talking. This says nobody.
I've got two absolute monsters on Lake the Ozarks in my life, over 10 pounders.
Really?
Both of them were pitching a jig down Bluff banks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
One
it
of
was
them-
May, wasn't it?
No,
Probably
one
not-
of them was in March and the
Right.
other one was in
All right.
April, maybe 1st of May.
Yeah.
But giants do use that.
there's
block.
less, it's kinda like going up the river. Where Jack was talking about going way up the river,
Uh-huh.
that's fine when there's about a dozen boats up there.
Right.
When there's
300 boats like there will be this week.
a
or
couple
next
hundred
week.
boats up there,
Yeah.
I wouldn't no more go up there than nothing.
Yeah.
Because they're all affected by boat traffic within 30 minutes. There's just not enough water.
Yeah.
There's not enough fishable water where those fish are gonna be.
Yeah.
And guess what? It's gonna get fished immediately. That's why it's never good for more than just a couple, 3 tournaments in the spring. They go up there, they beat it up. Same way with the Bluff. Bluff is exactly the same way. There's less places that are perfect
Right.
for that fish to be on there. Can you catch a big one out there? Absolutely.
I usually
Absolutely.
look for rock transition when I've had success, and I think I've caught some good ones pretty much every season of the year because I'm out there a lot and I go play with it because I'm tired of the backs of creeks or something like that. And you know, I'll find some on some ledges, I'll find some on some rock transitions inside little bluff cuts. Most consistent is around a rock slide. So if you're heading down a bank, I mean, I can name a bank right up there in the U of the Nangla, and it's got 5 or 6 rock slides right along there, and I can go fish that any time of the year and catch fish and some quality fish. But I'm not you guys, and that may be something a little less, like you said, if it doesn't feel right, that may not feel right to a lot of guys. I just thought I'd throw it out there to the table because it's probably not going to get much pressure.
A bass needs a reason to stop.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the time. When he's heading down the bank, he just needs something to stop by. Now, he might not live there, but when he's swimming and he's feeding and stuff like that, he wants to be hunkered down. He wants to be hiding,
Yeah.
If he was in this room, he'd be in under them jackets there, waiting to dart out,
Right.
And the bigger he gets, the better his hiding spot is,
Right.
But there's just, if there's less spots for him to be, then that limits how many fish are going to be along that bluffy area or something.
Right, yeah.
But those rock slides, it's just a reason for him to stop.
Right.
Simple as that. If one rock sticks out that much further, guess what? You're always going to catch one there.
Yeah.
You might not catch 2 or 3, but there's always going to
Right,
be one there.
right.
Because out of a 2-mile strip of bluff, that's
Yeah.
perfect. You
Yeah.
know, that's all one big one needs.
Yeah.
You know,
May not be,
Yeah.
may not be something to target on the Big Bass Bash, but I just thought I'd throw it out to you guys just because there's gonna be so much pressure. And that kind of stuff
It only takes one fish.
doesn't hardly
I'd
get
sure
pressure.
take one of those 10 pounders.
Yeah, yeah, right,
I mean,
yeah.
That might be the way you use that bait. You know,
It's a
something
glide
like
bait,
that.
yeah.
Something
That-
where it's got a lot of drawing power. Get
Right.
down some clear water. Go
Yeah.
fish and bluff ends that are
Right.
getting a little less pressure.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be going down every single bank with that. But
Right.
If there was windy bluff ends or something like
Right.
that, sure, that's a great tactic and hit as many of those as you can a day.
Yeah,
But for me to sit there and I would target those with a jig or crankbait. Probably not, because I'm probably trying to move in and look for, if I'm using a jig or crankbait
Yeah.
or spinnerbait, probably going in the creek and looking for them. But if I were, out there looking for one big one, that's probably how I would do it. I don't know about you guys. Big secondary.
There's a lot more fish spawn on the main lake than we think on this lake, or than most people think.
they couldn't all go to the bank at the same time.
I know Jim Dill's caught a lot. He's the one who mostly showed me how to ledge fish.
Yeah.
And it's been different times of the year, and I've gone different times of the year because I'm out there a lot, so I'll go play around with it,
There's
And,
main lake.
and
there's
it's not all the time, but there's a lot of times I catch some pretty darn big fish.
Yeah.
And
If
sometimes
ever,
no doubt.
sometimes it's just throwing a jig.
If every
You're-
fish went to the bank to spawn, you kill them with
Yeah.
your frickin' trolling motor. There's some. I mean, trust me, they're literally everywhere and lots of them.
Yeah,
I mean,
got it.
part of it probably too, the boat traffic's so bad, it's hard to fish
Yeah.
main lake bluffs.
for sure.
Well,
Hate to
yeah.
see 'em.
Well, that's why lots of different times during the year. Damn, we've gone a long time. Sorry about that, guys. Let's so let's just wrap up with this final thing. We have one more to do next Tuesday night. So, Jack, you said up the river, and based on how things are setting up right now, like how far up the river and what kind of structure,
Well,
if any, cover
mean,
or cover water?
I'd start at Proctor 55 and I'll make my way up to, Deer Creek.
Mm-hmm.
And, the shallow wood might get beaten up pretty quick, and Dion he's right.
Yeah,
But, then you just start, I'd start there with an E-Factor spinnerbait, and after that I'd get to those docks up there, those nut docks up there.
yeah,
And, that's just what I do. I've seen some big ones come up, it just seems like there's more big ones up there. And down here, we've got a great population of bass. We've got a lot of up-and-coming bass down here, but I don't know. Maybe it's the grass is always greener.
Yeah.
Because we live
Yeah.
down here and there's
Yeah,
people
right.
down here. And I get up there and I have fun. And
Yeah.
I swing for the fences more,
Yeah.
and I don't guide as much up there.
yeah,
And so, once again, throwing bigger baits like a big spinner bait, and it's won several turns. Several of these big bass bashes have been won up there,
yeah. And on a spinner bait.
and on a spinner bait.
Yeah.
So
Joe, how about you? Area,
No.
area of the lake, and you're targeting a 7-pounder, and there's a lot of pressure out there on the lake.
I would probably stick with that Tantera to, Porter Mill.
Yeah,
Hurricane
hurricane
deck
deck bridge,
area.
one of my favorite areas of fish,
I fished a
especially
lot.
this time of year.
Up where Jack's talking about, and I think the biggest I've ever caught in this tournament's been around 6.
Yeah.
And I've caught a lot of those,
Yeah.
but like Dion said, those creeks up there, especially at this lake level, there's not too many places to hold fish,
Right.
and Lawson probably knows that area as well as anybody.
Yeah.
And Dion too, and you get a lot of boats up there, and you can't handle a lot of boats, and you're always following somebody, and not that it can't be one up there, but
Yeah.
it's tough. Now I say that, and that's probably what I'll go do. If I get a chance
Yeah.
to fish. 'Cause
If
I'm
I could fish
gonna
it, if I could fish it, that's what I'd do.
yeah, and not to say that you don't throw by or whatever and you catch an 8-pounder.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the main thing that nobody's mentioned is one word: luck.
Right.
You need some luck in this tournament.
That's why I say fish for 8 fish, 4 fish a day,
Yeah.
and run into the big one and pay attention to, luck, but, use your instincts and take advice from, all you guys.
There's a certain, if I catch a 5-pounder and Lawson catches an 8-pounder and we're throwing the same bait at the same
Right.
things, was Lawson that much better than me? Maybe.
Right.
But he might have just there might have just been an 8-pounder there.
Right, yeah,
And if
exactly.
there was an 8-pounder where my 5-pounder was, I'd probably caught it.
I'd say keep your
So-
bait wet.
Have fun, pick an area that you like to fish, that you're comfortable in, with a few lures, different styles of baits. Have fun.
Good deal. Thanks, Joe. Lawson?
I can't say that I wouldn't go up there, but I'd burn a hell of a lot of gas.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd probably spend about an hour and then run 60 miles the other direction. But that's just because I do know a lot of the perfect little places. But it still, Joe just said it, it takes a lot of luck to
Right.
catch a 7-8 pounder.
Right.
I mean, you can't go fishing for that one.
Right.
It's just going to happen.
Yeah.
And I would be the moron out there that had 20 rods laid out because you can catch him on anything.
Right.
And to say I would pick a stretch of lake, I couldn't, because they live everywhere.
Yeah.
But if I did have to pick one, it would probably be, same type stuff where Joe was just talking from Tan-Terra, probably more so to the toll bridge for me.
Yeah.
Because I have caught some true giants in that stretch.
Yeah.
More so than probably anywhere else.
That's a
I've
great.
got a lot of big ones.
It's a great
In
stretch.
a lot of places,
Yeah.
but for true giants, I've caught a number of them through there. So
Yeah.
I would probably fish that area a lot.
History. Yep.
Yep.
Well,
Michael?
I'm not going to give you one thing. I'm asking for 5 things.
Okay,
Fishing the
you go
bass.
for it, buddy.
I want a glide, like my favorite's the KGB Chad. So
Right.
give me a glide, give me a mag draft, give me a brush hog, a jig, and a whole bunch of boat gas. And I'm
A
gonna run
whole
around,
bunch of boat gas.
Yeah, I'm gonna run around like a madman and fish as much of the windiest, most obvious stuff I can with those big baits. And if it's not working, I'm gonna go to planking and pitching and
Yeah.
dropping that brush hog and jig everywhere I can. I think a big one would be hiding, and you're gonna run into something at some point. If you do that, you're gonna run into that 4 to 7 pound fish at some point through the weekend and pay for your weekend if nothing else.
Michael, there's going to be 1,500 boats, 3,000 anglers out there. How in the hell are you going to run around and find a spot to fish? Or are you just
A lot
going
of boat gas.
to just run around? And it's like, wow, there's nobody on that, and that's the kind of stuff I
That's
want to fish.
exactly right.
Pull up some bank and go fishing.
That's exactly
There you go.
right.
I love it. Austin, how about you, buddy?
I think it would come down to what I'm trying to do and what this rain's going to do. If we get a bunch of rain and it gets muddy and
Right.
it gets cold, I probably won't go up the river. But if it got muddy and warm, I might go up there and throw a spinnerbait. If it did get a little colder, I might stay a little closer to a little bit clearer water and fish it. Now, there's part of me that thinks I wouldn't mind putting something like a buzzbait or a spook in my hand, at least for the first part of the morning, and testing that. And it's something we really haven't talked about much, but man, I love a topwater bite, and I know probably everybody
Yeah.
listening does. So I'd probably start there, especially if that water got closer to 60.
Right.
And you could fish that in the dirty water. You can fish it in clear water. So I don't really have a place I would pick right now. I'd have to wait and see what the water clarity
Okay,
looks like.
yeah.
But that I'd have.
Would you
I'd
like a
have
little
jig.
bit with it if the water's warming? Would you like a little bit dirtier water?
I
Or
always
would it
do.
not? Would it matter?
Yeah, if I was gonna go shallow and flip, I'd like a little bit more dirty.
Yeah.
Topwater, you catch them in the dirty water up all the way to the dam in clear water. So I don't really know. If I got in practice, if I got on a pretty good topwater bite, I might go to find some clear water because they might come up a little bit more for it. But
Would you be more inclined to fish main lake to the first pocket, or from
No,
the
I'm
last
prob-
pocket to the back?
I'm probably fishing secondaries and back. That's
Okay.
what I would
Yeah.
focus on.
All right.
You know, that makes it simple.
Yeah, cool. Appreciate it. Dion, other than a quarter ounce jig.
I would have a little brown jig, a little handmade brown jig tied on with a little crawdad on it. I would have a Cinco on 15-pound braid and 15-pound leader. It'd be green pumpkin of some sort, and I would probably
Wacky style.
Yeah. Well, no, not
Or
necessarily.
shaky head
No, not
Texas
necessarily.
rig?
No, just Texas rig without
Okay.
no weight.
with no weight. Okay.
With
got
no
it.
weight. And then my swim bait would probably be a rubber one and it would be rigged on a weedless, like a Texas rig, rubber swim bait. It'd probably be a little bit bigger. And when I say that, it'd probably be as big as their glide bait.
Yeah.
And the only reason I say that is because once 10 o'clock rolls around and something like that where there's lots and lots of people, I'm going to start putting my bait where nobody else does.
Right.
And that swim bait's just as good going back under them docks as anything.
Did you say weightless?
No, it's going to have a weighted worm
Like a
hook. It's
quarter
going to be
ounce?
Texas rig.
Okay,
And
yeah.
for the most part, I'll either use a weighted worm hook, or I'll put like a little 1/8 ounce up in front of it. And that's so I can work it really, really slow. It's going to be a 6-inch bait.
Yeah.
It's going to be a bigger swim bait.
Yeah.
Like owner beast.
The easiest way is that owner
Yeah.
piece.
I like that, man. Note
Yeah,
to,
just
note
them
to
big-
self. That's fresh.
Just them big, one of
Yeah.
them big giant hooks, because
Yeah.
those big rubber swim baits are hard to get it's hard to get a hook through them. So
Right.
a beast, thank you very
Owner,
much.
yeah.
The owner beast has got a real funky shape to it, but it's got an extremely wide, tall up and down gap.
Yeah.
So when you're using a rubber bait that's that thick, you can still get them hooked good. It's probably one of the only baits that I would throw it on braid. I throw it on like 30-pound braid.
Straight up.
Just because it skips better. I can take 30-pound braid and that swim bait, and I can skip it out under the boats in the front yard out there.
Man.
And
That's great.
by
And
10
that's-
o'clock, the first day, you're gonna have to start going in there after him. You ain't gonna get him to come out very often, and I don't care where you're fishing.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're fishing bluffs. I don't care if you're fishing boat docks 80 miles up the lake.
Yeah.
Where I would start in Bollinger Creek. I got two stumps. I got two stumps in Bollinger Creek that I've probably caught 10 or 12 fish over 8 pounds off of in my life.
Damn.
And I would start on one and hope that nobody else went over the top of the other one before I got to it.
Yeah.
But and that's only because I know a big one lives there.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, there's only one other guy, maybe alive, that knows where those two are.
Yeah.
And it's not him.
And
It's his twin brother. He
One
knows.
of the things you've mentioned, a stump. I know you've mentioned this before. You have said this before, that you like cover that's kind of small cover because a big fish can dominate it.
Yep.
Is that still kind of a mindset
Absolutely.
that this time of the year you would?
If it's
think
only
about-
big enough for one fish, it's going to be a big one.
Yeah.
Guys, the crazy part about it is some of the stuff like Marcus puts in to throw his jerkbait around,
Yeah.
like now,
Right.
that'd be perfect for a big one, because he puts stuff in that he can make 2 casts,
Right.
That's
two casts, and cover them all.
Right.
Do what?
Where's he at? Follow Marcus around. That's what.
No, I ain't gonna lie. I know what he does.
Yeah.
I'm not stupid.
Oh yeah.
I go in there and find
all
that
know
shit after he leaves it.
Electronics now, man. There's
But the thing of it
nobody's
is-
name. Nobody's name is on a bro.
Yeah. Don't you just love Bill Davenport?
I do love Bill Davenport. by
And
the
I'm
way.
calling him out right now. I don't care if he likes me or not.
He does.
But no, he doesn't. He doesn't like me at all. You don't have to make that up for him. That guy ain't liked me since I was born. But anyways, the smaller, we need to get off of that.
He respects you.
Yes, absolutely. I respect him because there's nobody puts in any more work than Marcus.
talking.
Absolutely.
Nobody puts in any more brush in this pond than Marcus does.
Yeah.
Maybe the cooks.
Yeah.
But does Bill do that? No. Marcus does that. That's why he picked a young, healthy, big guy. They put in brush.
They do it together.
But small stuff, no, he doesn't. Don't. No, he doesn't.
I've seen him out
He
there.
drives the freaking boat. Marcus is the one doing all the slave labor. That's it. Davenport doesn't do nothing. He can drive. Get out there, Marcus. Go get that rock. That's all he does. Needless to say, and I don't care if he likes me. I'm telling you. But the smaller a piece of cover is, it eliminates 4 or 5 bass living around it.
Yeah.
Because it's got to be big enough for one to hide around.
Yeah.
And when you get a smaller one, it's conducive to a bigger bass.
Yeah.
Just because he's got less of them 2 and 3 pounders, rushing out there and getting his stuff before he
Right.
gets to it.
Yeah.
And so that's always been a big deal.
Yeah.
Anytime you see a natural stump on Lake of the Ozarks, you better write that down.
Yeah.
You better put that on your GPS and make sure you never erase it because
Right.
there're just not many of them
Right.
anymore.
Yeah.
Most of them, most of them get dug up during those cleanups in the springtime. You know, I only hope and pray that mine never gets found, you know.
Right.
The neat thing about them is both of them are about 5 foot deep.
Yeah.
They're just a skosh deeper, and the water's got to be low for you to even see it, you
Right.
know. But they always hold a big one.
I'll be
you know.
darned.
But after that, I'm like these guys. I'd probably run back down the lake, fishing kind of whatever the day dictated.
Yeah.
You know, if you get a bright, sunshiny day, you need dingier water.
Yeah.
If you get a rainy, cloudy day, you need to stay in the cleaner water.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just a rule of thumb that you got to go by on Lake of the Ozarks.
Well,
Simple as that.
I think when we do our round table next week, we're going to be just a few days away. We'll have a little bit better sense for the forecast, so we could probably dial that in a little bit better. Joe, I do want to close with you. What's new with Boatwrx besides Jack joining the pro staff? And what's new and what's going on, and what recommendations do you have for the Big Bass Bash anglers as they're coming down to Lake of the Ozarks here in the next couple of weeks?
You know, as far as the guys fishing the tournament, you know, have fun. If you need help with your boat, we're typically, you know, kind of got some guys on standby for emergencies. So, you know, call us and we'll do what we can to help. We've got an open house down at the Boatwrx on Friday, and we've actually got a demo event Saturday in Kimberly City at Table Rock. So if you're interested in demoing some boats, we got pontoons, surf boats. You know, I think Dion's going to man the surf boat.
Cool.
I'm actually going to surf.
Yeah, he's got a new surfboard.
I love it.
And we got some bass boats. So if you're interested in a demo event, we got a good one Saturday at Table Rock. As always, if you want to demo any of the boats we have, just reach out to us. You know, we've got a large inventory of 2022 Camuses left, so if you're in the market for a boat, we do have some that you can take home today. And you know, as far as the Big Bass Bash, get signed up. I know, take advantage of those early bird drawings that they have.
Yeah.
You know, you can win the $500 before the tournament even starts.
That date's passed.
Has it? Hopefully you did it last week.
April 11th.
April 11th.
Yeah, they're going to draw 12 of them. But don't forget to get a T-shirt that fits fishing, and you know, so and then there's the exact weight. So you know,
Yeah.
lots of ways to make a lot of
Sign
money.
up, have fun. You
Yeah.
know, we've talked a lot the past 3 weeks, and we basically said fish every square inch of Lake of the Ozarks with every lure
And
imaginable.
every bait that's in the tackle box. and pay attention to the conditions, and we're going to know more about that next week.
Yep.
Yep.
It's time to really just start paying attention to that weather and getting ready.
Thank you guys. Joe, thank you for hosting this, and thank you to the Boatwrx Pro staff for investing your Tuesday evenings over the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks now here with us. Appreciate you guys a lot. And all the people who view these on Bass and Bob and on Boatwrx, really appreciate you guys. They look forward to them. And a lot of guys, actually, they'll drive from Kansas City or St. Louis or Springfield. You know, they may be coming down fishing tournament or whatever, and this is what they do. They pop this on and listen to it on their way down to the lake. Anyway, thank you guys.